You thought it was over. You thought you had finally broken free from the cycle of manipulation, the gaslighting, the emotional chaos that defined your relationship with the narcissist for so long. You set your boundaries. You walked away. You began to heal. And for a moment, there was this profound sense of victory, this feeling that you had finally reclaimed your power, your peace, your authentic self. But what you didn't realize is that breaking the cycle only reveals the narcissist's most devastating weapon, their final card that they've been holding in reserve, waiting for the exact moment when you feel safest, when you believe you've truly escaped their influence. This isn't about the hoovering attempts or the love-bombing campaigns you've learned to recognize. This is something far more insidious, something that strikes at the very core of your healing journey. And if you've ever wondered why, even after going, no contact, even after years of therapy, even after building a completely new life, you still feel their presence like a shadow haunting your progress, then this video will expose the final manipulation that most people never see coming. I encourage you to like this content, share it with others who are on this difficult journey of recovery, and subscribe, because understanding this last card might be the difference between true freedom and spending years trapped in invisible chains that you don't even realize still bind you. The most terrifying aspect of this final card is how it operates with complete stealth, disguised as your own thoughts, your own protective instincts, your own hard-earned wisdom about relationships and life. This manipulation doesn't announce itself with dramatic gestures or obvious cruelty. Instead, it whispers in your own voice, using your own vocabulary, your own fears, your own past experiences as ammunition against your continued healing and growth. What makes this psychological warfare so devastatingly effective is how it masquerades as genuine self-protection, as mature caution, as the voice of experience warning you about repeating past mistakes. It convinces you that its constant criticism, its relentless focus on potential dangers, its systematic undermining of your confidence is actually evidence of your growth, your self-awareness, your commitment to never being hurt again. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lies something far more sinister: the narcissist's final attempt to ensure that even in their physical absence, you remain psychologically imprisoned, unable to fully embrace the life, the love, the joy, the peace that you've worked so hard to create. Carl Jung understood that the most profound psychological wounds are often the ones that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness, and the narcissist's final card exploits this understanding. With surgical precision, they don't need to contact you directly. They don't need to show up at your door or send messages through mutual friends, because they've already planted something far more permanent, something that lives inside your own mind and continues their work of sabotage long after they've physically left your life. This final card is what I call the implanted voice, the internalized critic that sounds exactly like them but speaks with your own inner dialogue. It's the part of you that questions every moment of happiness, that second-guesses every healthy choice, that whispers doubts about your worth, your judgment, your right to peace and joy. But this implanted voice is far more sophisticated than simple self-criticism. It has studied you intimately. It knows exactly which buttons to push, which fears to activate, which insecurities to exploit. It understands your triggers, your vulnerabilities, your deepest wounds, and it uses this insider knowledge with the precision of a master manipulator. The voice doesn't sound obviously malicious. It sounds reasonable, concerned, protective. It presents itself as the wise part of you that learned from past pain, that knows better than to trust too easily, that understands the harsh realities of life that others are too naive to see. When you start to feel genuinely happy, this voice whispers that you don't deserve it, that something terrible is about to happen, that happiness is dangerous. Naive, a setup for inevitable disappointment when you begin to trust someone new. This voice catalogs every tiny inconsistency, every minor flaw, as evidence that this person will ultimately hurt you, just like they did when you achieve something significant. This voice immediately shifts your focus to what's missing, what could go wrong, what you should be worried about. Instead, the implanted voice operates with the narcissist's characteristic ability to weaponize your own healing against you. If you've learned about healthy boundaries, this voice tells you you're being too rigid, too difficult, too demanding. If you've developed self-compassion, this voice suggests you're making excuses, being weak, avoiding responsibility. If you've started prioritizing your own needs, this voice accuses you of being selfish, narcissistic, exactly like them. The most diabolical aspect of this final manipulation is how it disguises itself as your own thoughts, your own concerns, your own protective instincts, making it nearly impossible to recognize that you're still being controlled by someone who may not have spoken to you in years. Jung wrote extensively about the process of introjection, how we internalize the voices and judgments of significant others, especially those who held power over us during vulnerable periods of our lives. But what he also understood is how these introjected voices can become more tyrannical than the original source, more persistent, more cruel, more destructive, because they operate with insider knowledge of your deepest fears and vulnerabilities. The narcissist's final card isn't just any internalized voice. It's a sophisticated psychological program designed specifically to undermine your healing, to sabotage your growth, to ensure that even in their absence you remain small, diminished, afraid to fully embrace the life you deserve. When you start to feel genuinely happy, this voice whispers that you don't deserve it, that something terrible is about to happen, that happiness is dangerous. Naive, a setup for inevitable disappointment when you begin to trust someone new. This voice catalogs every tiny inconsistency, every minor flaw as evidence that this person will ultimately hurt you, just like they did when you achieved something significant. This voice immediately shifts your focus to what's missing, what could go wrong, what you should be worried about. Instead, the implanted voice operates with the narcissist's characteristic ability to weaponize your own healing against you. If you've learned about healthy boundaries, this voice tells you you're being too rigid, too difficult, too demanding. If you've developed self-compassion, this voice suggests you're making excuses, being weak, avoiding responsibility. If you've started prioritizing your own needs, this voice accuses you of being selfish, narcissistic, exactly like them. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated, because it uses your own growth, your own self-awareness, your own healing insights as weapons against your continued progress. What makes this final card so devastatingly effective is how it mimics genuine wisdom, genuine caution, genuine self-protection. It doesn't sound like obvious sabotage. It sounds like reasonable concern, like mature thinking, like the voice of experience warning you about potential dangers. This is why so many survivors spend years in therapy, making tremendous progress in understanding the abuse they experienced, while still feeling mysteriously stuck, unable to fully embrace joy, unable to trust their own judgment, unable to believe they truly deserve love and peace. The implanted voice becomes a sophisticated internal prison guard that doesn't need locks or chains, because it convinces you that your cell is actually a sanctuary, that your limitations are actually wisdom, that your fear of living fully is actually mature self-protection. It tells you that people who seem happy are either lying or haven't learned life's hard lessons yet, that trust is naive, that vulnerability is dangerous, that hope is a luxury you can't afford given what you know about how cruel the world can be. The voice becomes particularly active when you're on the verge of a breakthrough, when you're about to make a decision that would significantly improve your life, when you're considering taking a risk that could lead to genuine happiness or authentic connection. Suddenly, this voice becomes urgent, insistent, flooding your consciousness with every possible reason why this is a mistake, why you should stay safe, why you should protect yourself by remaining exactly where you are. It presents itself as your wise protector, your inner guardian, your voice of reason. But what it's really doing is ensuring that the narcissist's final wish comes true, that you never fully heal, never fully thrive, never fully escape their influence. Even years after they're gone, the implanted voice serves their original purpose of making sure you remain diminished, making sure you never become everything you could be, making sure their prediction that you'll never find real happiness without them becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The implanted voice is particularly cruel in how it targets your moments of vulnerability when you're scared, when you're uncertain, when you're facing a difficult decision. It doesn't offer comfort or encouragement. Instead, it amplifies your fears, confirms your worst suspicions about yourself and others, pushes you toward isolation and self-sabotage, all while convincing you that this is wisdom, that this is self-protection, that this is you being realistic about life's dangers. Jung understood that true healing requires what he called the differentiation of the psyche, the ability to distinguish between thoughts that serve your authentic self and thoughts that serve old wounds, old programming, old systems of control. But the narcissist's implanted voice is designed to resist this differentiation. It shapeshifts it, adapts it, learns to speak in the language of your healing journey, while continuing to serve the original agenda of keeping you small, keeping you controlled, keeping you convinced that you're fundamentally flawed, dangerous to others, unworthy of genuine love and respect. The voice becomes particularly active when you're on the verge of a breakthrough, when you're about to make a decision that would significantly improve your life, when you're considering taking a risk that could lead to genuine happiness or authentic connection. Suddenly, this voice becomes urgent, insistent, flooding your consciousness with every possible reason why this is a mistake, why you should stay safe, why you should protect yourself by remaining exactly where you are. The most insidious aspect of this final manipulation is how it convinces you that you're protecting yourself when you're actually imprisoning yourself, that you're being wise when you're actually being controlled, that you're thinking for yourself when you're actually still following the narcissist's agenda of ensuring you never fully heal, never fully thrive, never fully escape their influence, even years after they're gone. The implanted voice serves their original purpose of making sure you remain diminished, making sure you never become everything you could be, making sure their prediction that you'll never find real happiness without them becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's what the narcissist didn't count on. Here's what their final card cannot ultimately defeat: your capacity for genuine self-awareness, your ability to learn to recognize the difference between authentic inner wisdom and implanted programming, your growing skill at distinguishing between thoughts that serve your healing and thoughts that serve old wounds. The key to defeating this final card lies in developing what Jung called the observing ego, the part of your consciousness that can step back and witness your own thought processes without being immediately swept away by them. When you notice thoughts that consistently undermine your happiness, that always find reasons why good things won't last, that invariably talk you out of healthy risks and authentic connections, you're beginning to recognize the implanted voice for what it is. When you observe that this voice only seems to speak up when you're moving toward joy, growth, connection, or authentic self-expression, when you notice that it never encourages you to take healthy risks, never celebrates your victories, never supports your healing journey, you begin to see the pattern, the agenda, the continued manipulation disguised as self-protection. Recovery from this final manipulation requires patience with yourself, compassion for the part of you that learned to internalize criticism as a survival mechanism, and the willingness to question thoughts that seem protective but consistently lead to isolation, self-sabotage, and a smaller life than you deserve. It means learning to ask yourself when that voice speaks up, whose agenda does this thought serve? Does this voice encourage my growth and healing, or does it keep me stuck? Does this thought expand my capacity for joy and connection, or does it contract it? Authentic inner wisdom feels different from the implanted voice. It doesn't berate or shame, or fill you with dread about the future. Instead, it speaks with quiet, knowing, gentle guidance, loving truth that honors both your need for genuine safety and your right to live fully, to love deeply, to trust wisely, to hope courageously. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, required the courage to reject not just external authority that doesn't serve you, but internal authority that keeps you trapped in old patterns. The narcissist's final card depends on your continued obedience to their internalized authority, your continued belief that their voice inside your head represents wisdom rather than continued control. The ultimate victory over this final manipulation comes not from silencing the implanted voice completely, but from recognizing it so clearly that it loses its power to control your choices when you can hear that voice and respond with compassion, but not compliance when you can acknowledge the old programming while choosing thoughts and actions that serve your authentic healing journey. You finally played the card that trumps all others, your own awakening to the truth of who you really are, beneath all the programming, all the manipulation, all the attempts to keep you small and controlled. The narcissist's final card was powerful, but it was never stronger than your capacity to reclaim your own mind, your own voice, your own right, to think thoughts that serve your highest good, rather than their continued dominance in recognizing this final manipulation. You don't just break the cycle. You shatter it so completely that it can never reform. The healing process requires you to become almost forensic in your self-observation, learning to trace the origin of thoughts that diminish you, questioning the source of inner voices that consistently steer you away from joy, connection, and authentic self-expression. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying legitimate concerns. It's about developing the sophisticated psychological awareness to distinguish between genuine intuition that protects you and programmed responses that imprison you. Jung understood that the work of individuation is never complete, that we must remain vigilant against the parts of ourselves that would sacrifice our growth to maintain familiar patterns of suffering. The implanted voice represents the narcissist's attempt to ensure your complicity in your own diminishment, to make you the enforcer of limitations they can no longer directly impose. But as you develop this deeper level of self-awareness, as you learn to question thoughts that consistently lead to self-sabotage, isolation, and the rejection of good things in your life, you begin to experience something revolutionary: the gradual emergence of your authentic inner voice, the one that was always there beneath the programming, waiting for you to clear away the debris of other people's agendas and discover the wisdom that belongs uniquely to you. This voice doesn't scream or demand or threaten like the implanted one. It speaks quietly with deep knowing, encouraging your growth, celebrating your victories, gently warning you of real dangers while never trying to talk you out of the happiness, joy, and love you deserve. The ultimate irony is that in trying to maintain control over you even after their physical departure, the narcissist has actually provided you with the final opportunity to achieve complete psychological freedom. Because once you recognize and overcome this last manipulation,